Hello and welcome to the special report. On today's show, probably one of the more tougher subjects I had to cover on this video series. The CEO of Beamdog responds to the Baldur Gate Seige of Dragonspear controversies, including a whole lot of social issues and a whole lot of game-breaking bugs and glitches. Guess which one is the more controversial one and the harder one to talk about? Please be advised that this video will discuss some sensitive subject matter, so please viewer discretion is advised. My name is JD Shadow, and the special report will start right now. By now, you have no doubt heard about the Baldur's Gate controversy, the Seige of Dragonspear expansion pack made by Beamdog software, and the fallout because of it. Many have felt that the game shoehorned expositions and preachy dialogue that did not fit the characters that they were given to, as well as other characters who were not really fleshed out that well. The most talked about one is a character, Ms. Henna, who is a supporting character and reveals that she is transgender. Now, to be fair, she does not tell you this in a vacuum. You have to do a dialogue tree that involves asking her about where she got her name in order for her to mention about that fact to you. But the controversy stems from the notion that she is in no ways fleshed out as a character, or that there is any other defining characteristic about her character. Not to mention that many feel as though that it is completely out of context given the time frame in which this particular game is set in. Now, whether or not you agree with that sentiment or not, it is that character in conjunction with the other characters in which they either had their personalities changed, some dialogue was added into some of the characters which really didn't fit the characters and only was used in order to mock certain special interest groups, and for a little bit it seems as though Beamdog and some of their developers were more than willing to poke the bear of those special interest groups by Steam forums and Steam user groups, with a few of them even asking for positive reviews on Steam, which is never a good thing to just come out and ask for given the current state of people who care a little about that sort of thing. And this has been a very sensitive topic for many people, and I will get to my viewpoints about these issues in just a second, but let's get to what Trent Osner, the CEO of Beamdog Software, has actually said in response to all of the controversy that has surrounded all of this. In a statement, he says, quote, "First of all, everyone here is ecstatic to have shipped Baldur's Gate Seige of Dragonspear. Siege represents years of hard work by a dedicated team that we grew from a combination of homegrown talent, original Baldur's Gate modders, and former BioWare developers. Seige of Dragonspear represents more than 25 hours of new Baldur's Gate gameplay and more than 500,000 words of writing. I'm proud of our team for launching this great expansion. We've received feedback around Ms. Henna, a supporting character who reveals she is transgender. In retrospect, it would have been better served that we have introduced a transgender character with more development. This is a lesson we will be carrying forward in our development as creators, and we will be improving this character in a future update. The last few days have shown us how passionately many of our fans care for our games. We have had a lot of great feedback from players who love the expansion and are having a great time experiencing the first new Baldur's Gate story in 15 years. While we appreciate all feedback we receive from our fans, both positive as well as negative, some of the negative feedback has focused not on Seige of Dragonspear but on individual developers at Beamdog, to the point of online threats and harassment. I just want to make it crystal clear that Beamdog does not condone this behavior, and moreover that it will not have the desired effect that we stand behind all of our developers 100%. We created the game as a group, and moving forward we'll work on the game's issues as a group, which I believe is exactly as it should be. We've received valuable feedback around some bugs we've failed to catch for ship. We are hard at work right now patching up the issues that slipped through, and we're striving to ship fixes and improvements quickly. We will provide a complete list of the issues we plan to address in our next update. Issues of note we are addressing are: 1. Multiplayer. We are acting on reports of multiplayer issues and hope to have this fixed in the next update. Minsk has a line which generated controversy. Looking back on the line, we agreed with the feedback from our community It has nothing to do with his character, and we will be removing the line. We hope all our players continue to enjoy Seige of Dragonspear, and we look forward to providing an update in the near future regards Trent. Now, before I go into my opinions on this, one thing to note, a comment by D right below it says, quote, Trent has asked me to remove the comments from the announcement. You can discuss this announcement here. D has been in some controversy in his own right. When you look at the Steam forums about the game, he has actually been accused of banning certain people from the Steam forums for criticizing the game and bringing up certain issues regarding of the social aspect of it. This is after a sea of controversy surrounding what some people have said about the game, including developers, mainly Amber Scott, who has been known for being the main writer of this particular expansion, and I'm not going to bring all those quotes into it because by now you probably have heard all those quotes by now from Amber Scott and by a few other developers, which decided to poke the bear of this whole situation. Okay, so first of all, let's get to the controversy in of itself when it comes to putting certain characters like this into gaming. You have to have them make sense, and for the record, those people who think that me and others like me would be hateful toward the LGBT community or any community of minorities just because we're criticizing the way Beamdog handled this whole situation, or that me or others like me would condone the harassment and the vitriol that was aimed at the developers of this game because of the issues surrounding it, is either an opportunistic dilettante or an idiot. I don't think you have to look that hard in order to see that I am nothing of the sort, because I think the easiest way to describe this certain issue to where no one is going to be completely upset is that their hearts are in the right place, but the execution of these characters left something to be desired. One of the things that was being taken to task is that transsexual character was Ms. Henna. Now, to their credit, she does not tell you she's a transgender in a vacuum. You have to ask her something about her name, and then she tells you that. Now, it's done in the dialogue tree, so you have to actually get her to tell you that, and that's more or less the hardest thing to really talk about, because you have to talk into what time frame is this particular game set in. Would they just come out and tell you that? How comfortable are they to inform you of that decision that they have made? Many people felt as though Beamdog missed the mark there in delving into that subject matter, because it's a sensitive subject matter. Is very, very sensitive, and many people feel that if you're going to make a character like that, you cannot make that be their defining characteristic. You cannot do that, because then you create stereotypes. You create those type of characters that are just put in there for the sake of having them in there and not have them be normal people, because transgenders, LGBTQ communities are made of normal people who have that characteristic. But that doesn't make them be defined by that characteristic. There are other things about them that make them unique other than the fact that they are lesbian, gay, transgender, or bisexual. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have things they like, they have things they dislike, they have things they're good at, there are things that they are not so good at, they have things that they hate, that they like, they have different music tastes, they have all sorts of different things that can define them other than the fact that, hey, I am a lesbian, or I'm gay, or I'm transgender. There are a lot of different things that define them, and I think it's very insulting to LGBT communities to have a character in a game whose their only real defining characteristic is that they are belonging to that community. Because, well, one, you degrade them into stereotypes, you degrade them into these token characters whose only purpose is to be the, for lack of a better phrase, advertising mascots for your game, and they should not be. You're telling that community or any minority community that they don't deserve a backstory. They don't deserve to be normal. They're put in there for the sake of being different, and they don't want that. They want to be known as normal because they are normal, and that doesn't mean that a character cannot be widely open to who they are like they are in this game. Is perfectly okay. I do think it's very good that we got to this point where people are no longer scared about their own sexual orientation, regardless of what it is. Of course, historical context might matter in some cases, because those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and as a good way in order to teach people how it was like back then so they don't do the same thing now. But also, then you think as though these people are different than us. These people are different from anybody else in the world. And that's not the case. They are the same people as anybody else. The only real difference is that they love people of the same sex, or they didn't think they belonged in a male's or female's body. That's the only thing that's in any way different from them, and that doesn't make them any less of human beings. And I feel like having someone just put in there for the sake of having them in there and just have that be the absolute only characteristic that they have doesn't really seem all that interesting. And maybe that's a blessing and a curse, because maybe we see gay, lesbian, transgender, and bisexuals as normal people. Maybe it doesn't faze us as much as it used to. It doesn't faze us at all. And that is a very good thing, that it doesn't faze us, if at all, very little. But at the same time, you have to also make interesting characters. And I always have said, if you make interesting characters, the diversity will come. You don't have to force the diversity. You don't have to force that sort of thing. Because if you have those interesting characters, then the diversity will come, because you're forced to switch it up from time to time. You're gonna get those people of color. You're gonna get those LGBT people. You're gonna get everybody in between. Even the heterosexual characters are going to be interesting because they have interesting traits that are not defined by their sexual orientation or race or religion or gender or whatever else you may think might make them a little bit different. And if you want full-on proof of this, you have to go no further than go watch the very first episode of the new season of Sailor Moon Crystal. Haruka and Michiru are a lesbian couple, but they have very interesting characteristics that make them unique, other than the fact that they are lesbian. They don't force that upon you. They let you learn that naturally. And that is something that I think Beamdog Software missed the mark on, is that they did not introduce the character naturally. They did not introduce that aspect naturally in a way that makes people want to connect with that character. It didn't let players connect with that character. And you have to do that with any sort of character, whether it be straight, gay, lesbian, transgender, any sort of defining characteristic. You have to make it interesting, or else it's not going to work out regardless of who they are. But that is a very touchy subject, and I don't know if I even worded what I said correctly in a way that everybody will understand where I come from on that subject without offending anybody. It's something that a lot of people have been very sensitive of, especially in recent times. But that is one of the reasons why when Beamdog Software was first being criticized about that, they went on the offensive. They went for the special interest groups. They went for those people who were complaining about that, not necessarily because of it having a transgender or diverse characters in the game, but how they implemented them. And it's really difficult to separate those two things, to separate, okay, this character is not interesting, but we have no problem with LGBT characters being in the game, but this particular character is not interesting because there's really no other thing to define them, or they do absolutely nothing of value within the story. And even if they were interesting, even if they were somebody who really added to the story, there were these other issues that were going on within the game. One of the main characters, Safana, had a sultry rogue voice, had this whole thing where her entire personality was altered for this particular expansion, to where she is mocking the character. She's really just mocking your character. And then in Baldur's Gate 2, where Seige of Dragonspear is supposed to be the bridge in between the two games, she returns to her sultry ways, and it doesn't really make much sense when you think about it. Why does she change characters in the expansion pack and then goes back to her original ways in the canon storyline? It doesn't make much sense, and it doesn't really have any reason for her to go that route. And that's one of the other main situations that were going on about this particular expansion. And not to mention that there is one particular character that they were talking about, Minx, who had that out of character line in which he would never say within character. It was just really heavy-handed, and it just was preachy, and it just didn't make sense for the characters that they had in there, for the characters that they were giving them to. It just never made any sense, and it's very good that Trent Osner is actually saying this, who's actually bringing that up, but it really doesn't explain another part of this. And the other part of this is one that Trent Osner is the very same person that had been clamoring for people to leave positive reviews on the Steam store page for the game, which is never a good good thing. You don't want to do that. Why just aggravate the situation even more? And the other main concern that people had was that Beamdog was using the controversies surrounding the transgender character and the lines that certain characters had in order to deflect to criticisms about the numerous bugs people were experiencing, about the numerous crashes people were experiencing with the game. And the crashes are something that hasn't been addressed by Beamdog, at least not in this initial blog that he posted. The majority of the Steam user reviews, if you go onto that website, and I will give you the link to the Steam store page in the description below this video so you can get a firm representation about just what exactly people were concerned about with the game. The majority of the negative reviews had to do with the bugs and the glitches and everything else. And yes, there were a few people who were concerned about the social justice aspect of the characters being in there, but they were concerned that they were just overly preachy about it. You don't have to be preachy about those things. But the worst thing you could probably do, the worst thing you could do is to use them as martyrs. You don't do that. That just makes it worse on you. Be upfront about the problems with the game, with the technical problems with the game, that people saw this game as someone's headcanon that they just shoehorned into the game for the sake of having it when it didn't really make any sense, that they could make their own original game with those kinds of characters and it would be just fine. Why do you have to put them into a game in which is already established and the traits that you're adding to these characters are not going to make any sense in the canon timeline that you're setting that expansion in? And you misrepresent what people's complaints are in the forums, in the user reviews. You don't misrepresent what those complaints actually are, or where they're coming from, or who's posting them in the first place. If Amber Scott really does think that these characters needs a bit of an overhaul like that, then create an alternate universe storyline. Create a new form of storyline in which you could do basically whatever you want with the games, whatever you want with the characters, and no one will complain because they'll know it's an alternate universe storyline, or maybe a different telling of the storyline, or maybe an altered telling of the storyline. But don't put it into the main storyline in which you're making a situation in which you have to explain why in the middle of the timeline they suddenly change into a wisecracking person or a social conscious person and then goes back to normal, for lack of a better term, in Baldur's Gate 2. That just becomes lazy writing on your behalf, and you're trying to excuse it by going after those who criticize you. You're misrepresenting arguments, you're misrepresenting concerns, you are poking bears, and you really should just let the bears sleep. But this is just me telling my thoughts about the controversy in of itself. I believe that what Trent Oster did here is a good sign, is a great start, but he should have addressed a whole bunch of other issues, because there's obviously a ton of different situations that he needed to address here, including the misrepresentation of the arguments that people were having about the game, some of the other glitches that people were experiencing, and the review aspect of that. The way that he went about begging for positive reviews from the fans of the game. That just provoked things even more, and given the focus on things like that, you probably should not do that, as I said before. But this is a very good start. This is something to show that maybe they are actually listening to the people who are saying that at the very least address these crashes and these bugs, because while the social commentary may have a lot of gray area and a lot of layers to the situation that you might want to talk about, and it does elect a lot of serious discussion, the bugs and glitches in the game are black and white issues. These are things that any sane video game developer should work to fix as soon as possible, because I bet you any gamer would rather play a game with shoehorned token characters than to play a game that is severely unplayable because of corrupt game save files and multiplayer that just does not work. And that's going to do it for this edition of the special report. Thanks again as always for watching and for keeping an open mind about some of the topics that we were discussing today. I know it's a very sensitive topic to discuss, and I would like for the channel to be a sort of safe haven to talk about certain issues like this without there being a whole lot of screaming and shouting at each other, because I think we need to be above that when we talk about social issues. Anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you liked it, and be sure to comment on what you thought. Did you agree? Did you not agree? Is there something that I might have overlooked about this issue? Be sure to leave it in the comments down below. My name is JD Shadow, and that just happened.